The dust hung in the air like a veil of copper as Samuel Blackwood guided his horse through the canyon pass. The summer of 1883 had been merciless to the Arizona Territory, baking the earth until it cracked like old leather. Samuel had been working his modest ranch for nearly 15 years now, ever since he'd mustered out of the cavalry and decided that the open spaces suited him better than the confines of military life. He was a man of routine, of early mornings and honest labor, and he prided himself on knowing every rock, every gulch, every stand of mesquite on his land. But today something was different. It started with the cattle. Samuel had noticed 3 of his steers missing during the morning count, which wasn't entirely unusual given the vastness of his property and the cleverness of the animals when they wanted to be. What was unusual was the trail they'd left behind, heading not toward water or better grazing as cattle were inclined to do, but toward the most desolate section of his land, a place even the coyotes seemed to avoid. Samuel followed the tracks through the scorching afternoon, his canteen growing lighter with each passing hour. The hoof prints led him to a narrow ravine he'd only ventured into once before, years ago, when he was still learning the boundaries of his claim. The walls rose steep and red on either side, casting shadows that offered blessed relief from the sun. As he rode deeper into the canyon, an unsettling silence settled over everything. No birdsong, no rustle of lizards in the brush. Just the rhythmic clop of his horse's hooves and the creak of leather. Then he saw them, 2 of his steers, standing motionless near a rockfall at the canyon's dead end. Their heads were low, and they seemed almost transfixed, staring at something Samuel couldn't yet see. The 3rd steer was nowhere in sight. Samuel dismounted, his boots hitting the sand with a soft thud. He approached slowly, one hand on the rifle in his saddle scabbard, though he couldn't have said what exactly he thought he might need it for. As he drew closer, he heard it. A sound so faint he thought at first it was the wind playing tricks in the canyon. But then it came again, clearer this time, a voice, human, weak and rasping. "Please," the voice said. "I'm begging you." Samuel's heart hammered against his ribs. He moved around the cattle, and that's when he saw the source of the voice. Partially hidden behind a tumble of boulders was the entrance to what appeared to be an old mine shaft, its timbers gray with age and half collapsed. And there, just inside the darkness of that entrance, was a man, or what was left of one. He was pinned beneath a massive timber beam that had fallen across his legs. His face was gray with dust and pain, his lips cracked and bleeding. His clothes, what Samuel could see of them, were torn and filthy, but there was something about them that suggested they had once been fine. A city man's clothes. The man's eyes locked onto Samuel's with an intensity that bordered on fever. "Please," he said again, "water, I'm begging you." Samuel had seen dying men before. He'd held more than a few in his arms during the war, watched the light fade from their eyes, while promises of letters to sweethearts died on their lips. This man had that same look, that awareness of mortality that transforms a man's face into something both terrible and profound. Without a word, Samuel unslung his canteen and knelt beside the trapped man, carefully tilting water into his mouth. The man drank greedily, desperately, water running down his chin and disappearing into the parched earth beneath him. "Easy," Samuel said softly, "not too fast, or you'll be sick." The man coughed and nodded, then his eyes found Samuel's again. "You came," he whispered. "I prayed someone would come. I've been here 3 days, maybe 4, lost count." Samuel looked at the beam pinning the man's legs. It was massive, probably weighing several hundred pounds. Moving it would require leverage, time, and probably more than one person. He glanced back at his horse, calculating distances, possibilities. "I'm going to get you out," Samuel said, rising to his feet. "I'll need to fetch some rope and— No." The man's hand shot out and grabbed Samuel's wrist with surprising strength. "No time for that. Please, listen to me. You have to reach inside first." Samuel frowned. Inside where? The man's eyes darted toward the deeper darkness of the mine shaft behind him. "My satchel. It's just inside, against the right wall. You have to get it, please, before anything else." There was something in the man's voice that went beyond desperation. It was urgency mixed with something else. Fear, perhaps, or guilt. "Friend," Samuel said carefully, "I think your legs are what need tending to right now. Whatever's in that satchel can wait." "No." The man's voice cracked. "You don't understand. If you don't get it now, if something happens to me, it'll be lost forever. Please, I'm begging you. Just reach inside and grab the satchel. It's right there. Then you can do whatever you want with me." Samuel studied the man's face, trying to read what lay behind those bright eyes. Was this the delirium of a dying man, fixated on something meaningless? Or was there something more to it? Against his better judgment, Samuel found himself curious. "All right," he said. "Stay calm, I'll look." He moved past the trapped man, ducking beneath the partially collapsed timbers at the mine entrance. The darkness inside was thick and cool, a stark contrast to the blazing heat of the canyon. Samuel waited a moment for his eyes to adjust, then took a cautious step forward. The mine had that peculiar smell of abandoned places, of damp earth and decay and time standing still. He felt along the right wall, as the man had instructed, his fingers trailing over rough stone and timber supports that felt frighteningly unstable. Then his hand struck something, leather, a satchel, just as the man had said. Samuel grasped it and pulled it free, surprised by its weight. This was no ordinary traveling bag. It was heavy, packed with something substantial. "Got it," he called back, turning toward the entrance. "Open it," the man said. His voice had changed, gained a new quality. Was that relief or something else? Samuel emerged back into the light and knelt beside the trapped man. He set the satchel down and unbuckled the straps, then opened the flap. For a moment he couldn't process what he was seeing. His mind refused to accept it. The satchel was filled with money. Not a few bills, not a small fortune, but stacks upon stacks of crisp banknotes. More money than Samuel had ever seen in one place in his entire life. There had to be thousands of dollars, tens of thousands. He looked up at the trapped man, his face frozen in shock. The man was watching him carefully, his expression unreadable. $50,000. He said quietly, "Give or take." Samuel's mouth went dry. Where did this come from? The man coughed, a wet, rattling sound. "Does it matter? I reckon it does." A bitter smile crossed the man's cracked lips. "I suppose you're right. It matters a great deal." He closed his eyes, and when he spoke again, his voice was distant, as if he were speaking from very far away. "My name is Thomas Fairweather. I was a banker in San Francisco. Was. Past tense is appropriate now, I think." Samuel said nothing, just waited. "I stole it," Thomas continued, "from my own bank, from accounts I managed, from trusts I was supposed to protect. I stole it over the course of 3 years, a little at a time, doctoring ledgers, creating false transactions. I was very good at it. No one suspected. I had a plan, you see. I was going to disappear, start over somewhere new, Mexico, perhaps, or South America, somewhere I could live like a king on my ill-gotten gains." He opened his eyes and looked at Samuel. "But God has a sense of humor, doesn't he? I was riding through this canyon, trying to take a shortcut to the border, when I decided to explore this old mine. I thought maybe there might be something of value inside, you see. always grasping for more. And then the timber gave way, and here I am, trapped like the thief I am, waiting for judgment. Samuel looked down at the money in his hands, then back at Thomas. There are people in San Francisco who are missing this money. Yes, Thomas whispered. Good people, people who trusted me, people whose lives I've ruined. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the sound of Samuel's cattle, shifting their weight in the sand. Samuel felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him, like those tons of rock and timber, pressing down on Thomas Fairweather's legs. Here was a choice that would define him. He could take this money, $50,000, enough to expand his ranch, to build the life he'd always dreamed of. Who would know? Thomas was dying, clearly. Even if Samuel managed to free him, moved that massive beam, the man's legs were almost certainly crushed beyond saving. Infection would take him within days, if shock didn't take him first. Or Samuel could do the right thing. The hard thing, he thought about the war, about the men he'd served with. Good men, most of them, who'd followed orders and done their duty not because it was easy, but because it was right. He thought about his own father, a circuit preacher who'd had little in the way of worldly goods, but who'd taught Samuel that a man's character was the only thing he truly owned, the only thing that traveled with him beyond death. Samuel closed the satchel and set it aside. I'm going to try to move this beam, he said. Thomas's eyes widened. You're not taking it? No. But why? I'm a thief. I deserve to die here. The money could be yours. No one would ever know. Samuel met his gaze steadily. I would know. He stood and moved to his horse, retrieving rope and a sturdy piece of timber he sometimes used as a lever. As he worked, fashioning a makeshift pulley system anchored to the canyon wall, he felt Thomas's eyes on him. The sun was sinking lower now, painting the canyon walls in shades of orange and red. It took the better part of an hour. Samuel rigged the rope around the fallen beam, ran it through a natural notch in the rock that would serve as a pulley, and then tied the other end to his saddle horn. The horse, a steady mare named Delilah, would provide the pulling power. Samuel positioned himself beside Thomas, ready to pull him clear the moment the beam lifted even a few inches. This is going to hurt, Samuel warned. Thomas nodded, his face pale. I know, do it. Samuel gave a sharp whistle, and Delilah began to walk forward, the rope growing taut. The beam groaned, shifted slightly, but didn't lift. Samuel urged the horse on, and with a crack of protesting wood, the beam suddenly rose. In that instant, Samuel grabbed Thomas under the arms and pulled with all his strength, dragging the man clear just as the rope snapped, and the beam crashed back down with a thunderous impact that shook dust from the canyon walls. They lay there for a moment, both breathing hard. Samuel looked down at Thomas's legs and felt his stomach turn. They were mangled, twisted at unnatural angles. One foot pointed completely the wrong direction. Blood was beginning to seep through the man's trouser legs. Well, Thomas said, his voice weak and threaded with pain, I suppose I owe you my life, for whatever it's worth. Samuel began tearing strips from his own shirt, fashioning rough bandages. We need to get you to a doctor. There's a mining town about 2 days' ride from here. They'll have someone who can help. Thomas laughed, a broken sound. Help? Look at my legs, mister. I don't even know your name. Blackwood, Samuel Blackwood. Well, Mr. Blackwood, look at my legs. I'll be lucky if they don't kill me within the week. Gangrene, infection, shock. Pick your poison. Samuel finished wrapping the worst of the wounds as best he could. Maybe, maybe not, but I'm not going to let you die in this canyon if I can help it. I didn't go to all that trouble just to watch you bleed out. He retrieved the satchel and placed it on Thomas's chest. When we get to town, you're going to tell the marshal what you told me. You're going to help them return this money to the people you stole it from. Thomas stared at the satchel, then at Samuel. Something in his face had changed, some barrier had fallen away. "Why?" he whispered. "Why are you doing this? You could have left me here, taken the money. Why save a thief?" Samuel was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. "Because," he finally said, "I don't think leaving a man to die is something I could live with. And I don't think I could live with stolen money either. Maybe that makes me a fool, but I reckon I'd rather be a fool with a clear conscience than a rich man who can't sleep at night." He stood and began preparing to move Thomas to his horse. It would be a slow, painful journey, and there was a very real chance Thomas wouldn't survive it. But Samuel had made his choice, and he would see it through. As he worked, Thomas spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. "I had a wife once, and a daughter. I lost them both to fever years ago. That's when I started taking the money, I think, trying to fill the hole they left behind, but it never did. It never could." Samuel nodded, understanding in his silence more than words could convey. "If I do make it," Thomas continued, "if by some miracle I survive, I want to make this right. I want to face what I've done. Maybe that's the fever talking, or maybe you've reminded me of something I forgot I had. A conscience." Samuel finally got Thomas situated across Delilah's back, as comfortable as possible given the circumstances. He retrieved his steers, who followed docilely now, as if whatever spell had held them had broken. As they began the slow journey out of the canyon, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors that seemed almost too beautiful for such a harsh land. 3 weeks later, Samuel sat in the marshal's office in the mining town of Copper Creek, watching as Thomas Fairweather, his legs amputated below the knees but his eyes clear and focused, dictated a full confession. The marshal had already sent word to San Francisco, and representatives from the bank were on their way. Most of the money would be returned. Lives would be rebuilt. Thomas looked across the room at Samuel and nodded once, a gesture of gratitude and respect. Samuel nodded back. The rancher had reached inside that mine shaft, expecting to find a satchel, expecting perhaps some revelation about the dying man's identity or past. What he'd found instead was a test of his own character, a moment that would have been easy to fail, but that he'd somehow, by grace or stubbornness or the memory of his father's teachings, managed to pass. As Samuel rode back to his ranch that evening, leaving the complications of crime and punishment behind him, he felt lighter than he had in years. His ranch was still modest, his life still simple, but they were his, earned honestly, and that was worth more than $50,000 could ever be. The canyon stood silent in the gathering dusk, its secrets kept, its shadows deep. And somewhere in that silence, in that space between right and wrong, where a man's soul is tested and measured, Samuel Blackwood had found something more valuable than gold. He'd found the kind of man he wanted to be, and discovered he had the strength to become him. The cattle lowed softly as he approached his homestead, and smoke rose from his chimney where his housekeeper had prepared the evening meal. It was a simple life, yes, but it was his, and it was good. And in the harsh, unforgiving landscape of the Arizona Territory, goodness was its own kind of wealth, rare and precious and worth preserving at any cost.